The auditorium hummed with a charged energy, filled with bright-eyed students eager to witness the debate of the century. Young scholars from campuses across the nation had gathered for the prestigious forum, where ideals collided in a spectacular dance of rhetoric. At the center of it all stood James Carter, a vocal advocate for change and progress, ready to challenge the very foundations of generational beliefs. With his tousled hair and vibrant purple shirt, James exuded confidence as he approached the podium. His heart thudded in rhythm with the anticipation in the room. He had honed his argument for weeks, meticulously crafting every word to slice through the doubts of his opponents. Today would be his moment to shine. As he cleared his throat, the chatter among the audience faded. Today, we discuss progress, a concept that is stifled by outdated ideologies, he began, his voice unwavering. I stand before you to advocate for a future free from the shackles of the older generations, whose time has long passed. Applause erupted, and James basked in the electric atmosphere. With every word, he painted a picture of a new America, vibrant, diverse, and progressive. While the baby boomers cling to their outdated values, we, the youth, are the torchbearers of true change, he declared passionately. But amidst the cheers, a figure in the third row caught his attention, Barron Trump. Dressed sharply in a tailored suit, Barron sat with a calm composure that felt like a quiet storm. James couldn't shake the feeling that Barron's presence was significant, as if he were a looming challenge just waiting for the right moment to strike. James pushed on, his conviction growing. Many among us can agree that we need a fresh approach, one that doesn't allow those who can't adapt to dictate our future. Why should the decisions of those who won't live to see the consequences overshadow our chance to shape our world? As he spoke, the audience was divided. Some were vehemently agreeing, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The atmosphere buzzed with tension, and it seemed every word James uttered propelled him further into the limelight. That was, until Barron stood. With a slow, deliberate grace, he walked to the front of the auditorium. The room fell silent. James felt a chill run down his spine, a mix of annoyance and curiosity as Barron approached the microphone. Thank you, James, for your passionate presentation, Barron began, his voice steady and controlled. But while you speak so fervently about the younger generation leading us forward, I urge you to consider, passion without wisdom is a recipe for disaster. A ripple of intrigue coursed through the audience. James felt his confident facade begin to crack. He wanted to dismiss Barron's remark, but something in the audience was shifting, a sense of doubt hanging in the air, foreshadowing an unexpected turn. Who built the very technology you use? Barron asked, his expression calm yet piercing. The innovators shaping today's world are not just under 50. Many have spent their lives creating the foundations we stand on. Are you willing to dismiss that legacy? James opened his mouth to retort, but the crowd shifted, some nodding in agreement with Barron. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was supposed to be the voice of a new generation, and yet, Barron's steady gaze felt like an anchor in the turbulent waters of rhetoric. Let's not forget that every generation learns from its predecessors, Barron continued, his voice echoing through the auditorium. By claiming that those over 50 should be silenced, you risk throwing away the wisdom earned through decades of experience, the very foundation of progress that allows you to stand here today. Frustration bubbled in James. He needed to regain control. But what about the outdated beliefs that divide us? He shot back, trying to rally his supporters. Beliefs that stifle true human connection and equity. Barron raised an eyebrow, undeterred. You speak of equity, yet how can you advocate for inclusion while advocating for the exclusion of millions based solely on age? Isn't that a contradiction? James felt his pulse quicken. This was not merely a debate about ideology. It felt like a test of character, and he was teetering on the edge. What you're proposing is a failure to acknowledge the deep-seated inequalities we face. Those traditional values are just tools of oppression. Barron's expression softened as he took a step closer to the mic, inviting James's ire but willing to extend an olive branch. I hear your passion, but in aiming for progress, are you willing to burn bridges instead of building them? Your heart is in the right place, James, but your approach could lead us astray. The audience murmured, tension palpable in the air. A gentle wave of realization spread among his peers. Their youthful fervor began to falter in the face of Barron's calmness. Could he really be right? Desperation clawed at James. He needed to strike back, to re-establish his dominance, but the words fell hollow on his tongue as Barron continued to draw the crowd's attention. Instead of silencing the voices of those who came before us, we should seek to learn from them. Or are we too proud to listen? James felt the weight of Barron's words, pressing down on him like an anchor. The cheers he had anticipated were replaced by thoughtful silence. Had he miscalculated? Was progress truly about blind fervor, or could it also be about understanding? With the atmosphere shifting in ways he couldn't control, James clenched the podium, feeling the tide of support wavering. As Barron stepped back, James stood frozen, grappling with the reality that his vision of progress might not be as straightforward as he had thought. And as the room filled with an expectant hush, James sensed their paths were intertwining in ways he'd never anticipated, pushing him toward a confrontation not just with Barron, but with his own beliefs. What should have been a battle was rapidly becoming an exploration. Little did they know, this debate was only the beginning. An ideological storm was brewing, and the truths they uncovered would challenge everything they thought they knew about progress, wisdom, and the essence of understanding. From that moment, James felt the winds shift, aware he was standing at the precipice of something profound. The debate was far from over. It had merely just begun. With the atmosphere shifting in ways he couldn't control, James clenched the podium, feeling the tide of support wavering. Barron had not only challenged him but had also planted a seed of doubt that took root in the booming silence. The weight of his words hung in the air, reverberating through the auditorium, and for the first time since this debate had begun, James felt uncertain. As Barron returned to his seat, the audience remained captivated, caught in a whirlwind of contemplation. James looked around, his earlier confidence battered and bruised. Students who once cheered for him were now whispering among themselves, their eyes darting between him and Barron, uncertain of whom to back. The spell Barron had cast was undeniable. He had spoken to their desire for change, but also to their need for understanding. James took a steadying breath, trying to muss his hair into some semblance of control while internally grappling with the allure of doubt. He had always prided himself on being a voice for the voiceless, a champion of the underrepresented. Yet here he stood, in a room full of his peers, wondering if he had misconstrued the very essence of his fight. Let's hear more from the other side, shall we? Dr. Harrison, the moderator, said tentatively, breaking the silence that had settled like a fog. Does anyone wish to present a counter-argument? James squeezed his eyes shut for a brief moment, desperate to reclaim his footing. He was prepared to plunge deeper, to fight back with every ounce of his passion, but the challenge loomed larger than before. Then, from the other side of the auditorium, a voice rang out, a familiar dare that silenced the room once more. I would like to speak, a young woman called out, her tone steady, yet tinged with hesitation. It was Sarah, another student known for her analytical approach. She'd faced James in previous debates and had always wielded facts like swords. Please, do, James said, realizing he might need allies rather than enemies. What's your take? Sarah walked to the podium, her demeanor calm yet magnetic. While I agree that the younger generation's voice is critical in shaping our future, I can't help but see the value in experience. To dismiss an entire demographic based on age feels like a disservice to the very principles we claim to support. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, and James felt a surge of frustration. But they're not merely experienced, they're outdated. They resist the very progress we seek, he countered, the fire rekindling in his chest. I understand your passion, James, she replied, her gaze unwavering. But think of your argument in reverse. Imagine we were treated the way you advocate, excluded merely because of our age. We're often labeled as millennials or Gen Z, but beneath those labels are individuals with unique insights ready to contribute to society. Barron nodded slightly, his expression encouraging, but James clenched his jaw. He could feel the room shifting once more, the divisions fading as Sarah's factual appeals resonated with his peers. He had painted the older generation as the enemy, but perhaps he was overlooking the complexity of the human experience. I believe progress isn't about exclusion, it's about collaboration between generations, Sarah continued, her voice gaining momentum. Bridging the gap can create a coalition strong enough to tackle the real issues we face. James looked around, his heart pounding as he realized the audience was captivated by Sarah's perspective. Was he really at risk of losing their trust? The very support he had relied on had slipped between his fingers like sand. The battle within him raged. How could he both advocate for youth and honor the generations that had paved the way? As he stood there torn, Barron stood up again, his voice cutting through the tension with a gentle authority. If I may add to Sarah's point, he said smoothly, I think it's vital to remember that every generation brings its own unique challenges and insights. Rather than dismissing the values of older generations as archaic, can we not reshape and reframe them? Adaptation is key. The crowd buzzed with intrigue. James could feel the ground beneath him shifting, the walls he had built around his argument beginning to crack. But adaptation shouldn't mean keeping the old guard in power, he replied hastily, blocking out the growing sense of understanding. No, it should mean leveraging their wisdom, Barron shot back, undeterred. You called for silence. But what happens if we can marry the experiences of those who came before with our youthful aspirations? Wouldn't that create something far more powerful? The doubts gnawed at James like a persistent itch. Wasn't he the one advocating for progress? With every word Barron shared, the fissures in his argument grew wider. I'm not saying I'm against learning from the past. But we can't just sit back and accept the status quo for the sake of nostalgia. Who said anything about nostalgia? Barron interjected calmly. This isn't about preserving the past. It's about understanding it, shaping it, and letting it guide us toward a future that reflects all voices. At times, we forget that progress isn't a straight line. It's a collaborative journey. The debate intensified, and tensions rose again as James struggled to find the words. This was not just about proving a point. It was about finding a way forward that encompassed all perspectives. The room buzzed with shifting allegiances. Students were experiencing a transformation of thought, and James realized he might have underestimated the power of connection. Change requires dialogue, not division, Barron continued. Are we brave enough to dive into conversations that may be uncomfortable but are necessary for growth? The audience seemed to lean in closer, their collective focus on Barron as if he were the compass guiding them through uncharted waters. James swallowed hard, grappling with the confusion swirling in his mind. Did he truly believe that dismissing the wisdom of others was the best path forward? His pulse quickened as the realization washed over him, igniting something new within, a flicker of hope intermingled with uncertainty. But isn't there some value in urgency? He challenged, shifting his gaze from Barron to the crowd. What if we move too slowly, trying to build bridges while the world outside is burning? A heavy silence filled the room as students considered this. It was a valid point, but one that begged for nuance. Sarah stepped forward once more. And yet, if we build those bridges too hastily, we risk crumbling them before we can cross. Let's take the lessons learned and draft a new blueprint rather than build on cracked foundations. James's heart raced as the realization set in that perhaps he had painted progress in too narrow a brushstroke. It wasn't just about youth challenging the past. It was about understanding the tapestry woven from multiple threads of experience and wisdom. As the debate wore on, it became clear that both youth and age had something vital to contribute, and the real challenge lay in finding harmony between the two. James was beginning to see a path forward, one not dominated by singular beliefs, but illuminated by collaboration and understanding. And with that recognition dawned an even greater challenge, the daunting task of integrating the wisdom of the past with the fervor of the present. The auditorium pulsed with new energy as voices united in the quest for common ground, setting the stage for the revelations still to come. James felt exhilaration ripple through him for the first time, and he realized this was not just a battle, it was a path toward real transformation. The path to true progress remained laden with challenges, but together, they could turn their ideologies into shared solutions, transforming the debate from one of division to one of hope. The path to true progress remained laden with challenges, but together, they could turn their ideologies into shared solutions, transforming the debate from one of division to one of hope. As energy crackled in the auditorium, James felt an unfamiliar wave of clarity. It was time to step away from defensiveness and embrace collaboration. But could he share this realization with his peers? A deep breath steadied him as he straightened his posture and faced the audience, no longer viewing them solely as judges, but rather as allies on this journey toward understanding. You know, he began slowly, when I first stepped onto this stage, I was adamant that my voice needed to rise above the noise. But right now, I realize the importance of harmonizing those voices instead. He could feel the attention of the room shifting back to him, curiosity lighting the pupils of his peers. We're all in this together. Conversations about progress shouldn't just include our frustrations, they should also incorporate the experiences that shaped us. We've painted ourselves into a corner by seeing only black and white. Barron nodded appreciatively, the early attention dissipating, and other audience members began murmuring in agreement. James forged ahead, adrenaline fueling his determination. Let's rattle the chains of division. It's time we break the cycle of one generation dismissing the other. Instead, let's build a shared vision that celebrates the wisdom of age and the energy of youth. With each word, he sensed the audience's eagerness to move forward, an urge to dig deeper into this shared narrative taking shape. Sarah stepped closer to the podium, her gaze fixed upon James with encouragement. That's right. We might feel the urgency to push our beliefs forward, but let's remember that the best change occurs when everyone is involved. We're not just voices in chaos, we're a community. A frail old man in the back of the crowd stood up, his hands trembling slightly as he addressed them. As someone who has watched generations come and go, he said, his voice steady with age, I can tell you that my experiences have taught me humility based on mistakes we made and the successes we celebrated. If we truly wish to guide the future, we need to cultivate a space where understanding reigns above all. James felt a swell of appreciation for the man's words, urging the crowd to engage with his simple wisdom. Exactly, he exclaimed. We're all composed of our histories, stories, and lessons. And I'd like to hear from each of you. Let's create a dialogue. The audience murmured, and various hands shot up in response, students eager to share their insights. As James called on individuals one by one, the energy transformed into an exchange of ideas, an alchemy of perspectives that seemed to ignite their collective spirit. They were no longer adversaries, they were co-creators looking for ways to ensure every voice mattered. A young man stood, stammering slightly. I think we need to acknowledge that not all older generations are against change. Some are scared, not dismissive. My grandfather, for instance, constantly shares ways he tried to fight for equal rights. He wanted to support change but felt lost among the modern terminologies. So, it's not just about excluding them, it's bringing them along with us, step by step. Another hand shot up. And we can learn from past mistakes. When we discuss climate change, let's remember how prior generations interacted with the environment. We have the advantage of scientific data, but let's not erase their experiences. They can share what they did wrong, what they valued, and we can learn how to improve the methods of the past. James couldn't help but grin as the discourse flowed around him, ideas bouncing like sunlight off the walls of the auditorium. The walls that had once felt imposing now vibrated with optimism. This is it, he said, his excitement boiling over. This is the essence of collaboration. By understanding the past, we revolutionize the present. We empower ourselves to fight together for a brighter future. Barron stood again, and this time his words were anchored in a tone of reverence. Each of us has a part to play in this agenda of transformation. Let's not only listen to those around us, but also to the lessons embedded in our history. When we forge new paths, we should step carefully, honoring what came before. The crowd erupted into applause, resonating with the sentiment echoed back from the stage. James soaked in that energy, realizing how much the atmosphere had shifted since the debate began. What had once felt like a battle of wits had transformed into a melting pot of ideas, and he needed to harness that momentum. If we want to see real change, then we must take action together. Whether it's through community service, bridging the gap through mentorship, or organizing forums like this one, let's make sure everyone has a seat at the table. Applause erupted again, and students began to voice their thoughts, ideas of community cleanup initiatives, intergenerational mentorship programs, and discussions that shed light on the intricacies of history. A soft smile graced Sarah's lips as she leaned closer to James. You see that? It's powerful. You took that challenge and turned it into an opportunity. Yeah, he replied, still lost in the moment. I guess sometimes we need a nudge to remember what true progress looks like. What we share, our values, our stories, connect us. With the conversation weaving back and forth, it became clear that this debate was paving the way toward a new framework. James lost himself in the vibrant images painted by the crowd, a tapestry threaded with varied voices joining forces in hopes of guiding the future. As the dialogue continued to unfold, James's previous worries drifted away, replaced by a profound sense of purpose. In that auditorium, each individual had transcended their role as merely students and became architects of change, guiding one another, forging a pathway that included everyone. Outside the auditorium's walls, a world full of challenges awaited. But here, under the warm glow of the lights, they were no longer just fragments of society. They were a community united. And it was in that unity that they found strength, transforming a debate born of division into a collaborative movement that echoed with hope. As the forum wound down, a new resolve rested in the air, one driven by a shared vision, sparkling with potential. The discussion wasn't over. It had only just begun. James looked around, feeling the fervor of possibility igniting within them all, a torch lighting the way toward a future full of promise. As the forum wound down, a new resolve rested in the air, one driven by a shared vision, sparkling with potential. The discussion wasn't over. It had only just begun. James looked around, feeling the fervor of possibility igniting within them all, a torch lighting the way toward a future full of promise. As they concluded, Students began forming small groups, eager to brainstorm actionable steps they could take together. James moved towards Sarah, who was deep in conversation with the elderly man who had first spoken up. He felt a wave of gratitude wash over him for those willing to bridge the gap between generations. "Your idea about community initiatives is brilliant," Sarah said, her eyes shining with excitement. "Imagine if we created a project where we could share our talents and skills across age groups, a mentorship program where we not only learn but thrive together." "I love that. A space where knowledge isn't a barrier but a bridge," James interjected enthusiastically. But uncertainty flickered in the back of his mind. "But how do we approach this? We need structure, something that makes it easy for people to participate. Let's host workshops where both young and older generations can come to share their skills. We can showcase talents, from painting to coding, allowing everyone to be involved," Sarah suggested, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. As they brainstormed, Barron approached, having overheard their conversation. "What if the elders in our community could teach about their life experiences? Their failures and triumphs could provide invaluable lessons for us moving forward." James nodded vigorously, caught up in the vision. "We could even host a storytelling night, a space for sharing those narratives, letting individuals reflect on pivotal moments in their lives." Looking around, he realized how infectious the energy was, the potential for real change crackling like electricity. "But we need volunteers," he said, a spark igniting in his thoughts. "We can post flyers, recruit people through social media, and even partner with local organizations. This can grow into something even bigger." The group murmured in agreement, and soon, more students gathered around them. James felt a shift. It wasn't merely their ideas, but a larger collective awakening, standing in bold contrast to the silent skepticism he'd initially faced. "What about the school's involvement?" one student called out. "If we could get administrators on board, we could secure funding or space." "Yes. Let's approach them for support. We need their backing to make this a reality," James declared, feeling more like a leader than he had just hours ago. And just like that, waves of energy surged through the room, igniting conversations. Ideas spiraled, expanding in bounds. They fueled one another's enthusiasm, each thought a thread weaving a tapestry of collective engagement. As the last light of the evening sun streamed through the windows, casting a golden hue across the gathering, James felt a stirring within him, a sense of belonging and purpose surging to the surface. With each idea shared and solidified, he knew that beyond this gathering, beyond the auditorium walls, they were crafting a movement that would reach far and wide. It wasn't just about fixing the present. It was about shaping a future worth fighting for. A future where everyone had a role to play and every voice mattered. A wave of realization swept over him. This was not the end, nor would it be just a chapter in their lives. It was the beginning of something monumental. He looked around at the faces of friends and new allies, all bound together by a shared dream. "To the new generation and the old, let's forge a path toward progress," James declared, feeling a surge of hope. "Let's be the force that connects us, inspires change, and uplifts every voice." The words hung heavy in the air, electrified by the genuine commitment shining in their eyes. They were tired but invigorated, a collective heart beating in rhythm. Each person was ready to lay the groundwork for conversations that would lead to tangible change. As the last of the chairs were stacked and the auditorium lights dimmed, the group began streaming out into the night. But even in the fading light, James could feel a glow of anticipation surrounding them. The world outside awaited, filled with challenges and uncertainties, but the promise they carried together was incandescent. They were no longer just students fighting for their voices. They had become a chorus, harmonious and determined. Hands clasped and smiles exchanged, James looked up at the sky, the stars just starting to emerge, twinkling like possibilities before them. This was the dawn of a new beginning, a testament to resilience and hope. With every step they took, they moved forward, knowing they would nurture this sense of unity, and that together they would carve out a better tomorrow. In that profound moment, as they each made their way back into the world, James felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. The journey ahead may be steep, but he'd never again walk that path alone, for together they embodied the spirit of change, united, vibrant, and ready to illuminate the future.